Good morning and welcome to the Super Mania Show. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and I have a very special guest with me today that actually brought me into some new information regarding neurodiversity. So if you're new to the show, that's what we're here to talk about is neurodiversity. And all that means is that your brain processes information differently. This can be in the form of Tourette's, dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, bipolar disorder, certain types of epilepsy, and the list goes on from there. There are many, many types of neurodiversity. And actually, when you add them all up, we make up almost a third of the population. It's very exciting. So there's a whole bunch of us out there. This show is about education, support, positivity, and about disclosing our superpowers to the world, because that's right, even Harvard Business Review has acknowledged our superpowers. So without further ado, I'm very excited to bring on our guest to discuss our very important topic today of getting past discrimination. That's a tough topic, but we're going to talk about it and how to debunk the stigmas and get past it. So let's bring on the wonderful Jen Capstraw. How are you?
Hello. Terrific. It's great to be here, Catherine.
It's great to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
So I am an expert in email marketing strategy, which doesn't seem very relevant to our conversation, but I'll explain the connection. I have been on all sides of email marketing, brand side, agency side, and then the technology side. And my last full-time role, I served as the evangelist for a marketing technology platform. And while I was pursuing my ambitions as an email thought leader, concurrently, I co-founded an organization called Women of Email, because there was an imbalance of female thought leaders in the industry that didn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why were women not being showcased at conferences and so forth? So today that organization is more than 6,000 members in, the last time I checked, it was 66 countries, every continent except for Antarctica. And in 2020, I decided to strike out on my own. So I am a consultant to marketing technology platforms, in addition to running Women of Email. And I recently launched a podcast called Humans of Email, where we're talking to really interesting individuals in the industry, and neurodiversity has already come up as a topic.
Cool. And you are yourself neurodiverse, yes.
I got a late in life diagnosis, which is happening to a lot of people right now, especially women. A combination of the stress of lockdown with the pandemic and the ways that we were responding to that. And for me personally, my age, my hormones are changing, and that causes it to get even worse. So
it does. And actually, I can relate. I'm right there with you. So due to a hysterectomy I had a couple of years ago, I'm hitting menopause. And it's not that bad, I got to say. I know that a lot of women have it worse than me, so I don't want to discredit and say that it's not bad for anybody. I know for a fact that it is. But it is, however, changing my hormones, and some very interesting things are happening, including with my own neurodiversity. So I can definitely relate. My manic phases are changing a little bit, and my depressive phases are changing a little bit. So, which I don't appreciate. I had it down, and now my body's doing new things, and I don't appreciate it.
But being aware of what's causing that is really helpful.
Yes, it is. And I think the knowledge is power. Right? It really is understanding what's going on with you. And that's why on the show, we always advocate for education. That's what I'm trying to get out. Advocate for education. Get out there and learn on your own. So we're here to talk about discrimination, specifically pertaining to neurodiversity. So the first thing I want to talk about is terminology. So the term neurodiverse actually came from Judy Singer, who's a sociologist and author in Australia, who is herself neurodiverse. She is on the autism spectrum. And she wanted a more positive term because neurodivergent, as well as a few other terminologies, were developing a very negative connotation and a very negative message to them. And so she wanted a new term, something that would bring positivity. It would just spread the idea that neurodiverse is these different conditions, or however you want to refer to them, diagnoses, are not deficits. They're just different. It's just a new way, to understand the processing. So let's start with, so now we know what neurodiversity means and how it got here. What are some things that you've noticed on the terminology side?
Well, when I first got my diagnosis, obviously I hyper focused on it and wanted to know everything about it. And so I'm diving deep into communities and research. And I ended up on a subreddit, the ADHD subreddit, which now is more than 1 million members. And everything that I was reading about neurodiversity was really resonating with me, making a lot of sense to me, the good parts and the bad parts. And I was excited to find this huge community of people who were having similar experiences to me, and was like, great, I'm here to learn. I'm here to be part of community. And long before I ever got a diagnosis, I had become very aware of like, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? I didn't really understand why. A lot of things make sense to me now, but I did know that I had certain talents that were unique and special and that I could harness to accelerate my career, which is what I did, and became very authentic and open about like, hey, I kind of suck at certain things. Like, I have no time management skills. I cannot get an expense report done. But let me tell you, I can connect ideas and I can connect people and I can build community and I can get people as excited about email marketing strategy as I am. Like, I am freakishly enthusiastic about this. That sounds strange. It's exciting to me. And I hear from, I do a lot of public speaking, and I hear from the audiences I speak to that they're like, I didn't know email was so exciting. And I'm like, it is. This is great, right? So like, I'm just a complete nerd, and so I've figured out what's great about these pieces of me. I'm in this community, and there's a lot of gloom and doom, and people are very like, they feel that they have a disability, that they have a huge disadvantage in life, that they're never going to be successful. And the conversation is not like, hey, maybe you need to rethink your frame of thought, or you need to, focus on your strengths, and like, here's how you can work through this. Instead, it was just, let's all agree that your life sucks, and that you will never have a high quality life.
You'll never be happy. You'll never be happy. How dare you?
And hit me wrong. And so I tried to be encouraging. Here's my experience. Yes, there are things that are really difficult for me, but there are things that I'm really great at. And I celebrate that, and I focus on that. I figured out how to harness that professionally. And I used the word neurodiversity. My comment got deleted. I got this smackdown from the admins, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And they were like, first of all, we don't use that word around here. We don't respect it.
What word did they use?
They perceive it as a disability, like this.
Okay, so I want to
no silver lining.
I want to pause on that. I want to pause on that, because that happens a lot, and I think a lot of that. In fact, we had a previous guest that discussed this. A lot of that comes from the medical community, with the way that diagnoses happen. It's like, because, and I don't think that doctors mean to do it, but when they present it, it's all doom and gloom. It's, here's all the symptoms you're going to have, and you need medication, and all that. A lot of times is what they tell you. I hope not, but because everybody should choose their own holistic wellness path. But that happens a lot. And then you have people telling you, oh, you have this, oh, there's something wrong with you. And it is a very, going through, I want to take a minute to kind of, for lack of a better term, honor that feeling, because it's scary when you get diagnosed, even if you have the best diagnosis experience possible. It's scary because it's a new thing. It's a different thing. You have to adjust to it in terms of understanding it. It was always there, but you have to acknowledge it and feel it. But then there's so much positivity, and so when people use the word disability, and God love the ADA, man, they really are trying, but they are just killing us out there. They really are. They're just killing us by formally calling it a diagnosis and all of that. And so or a disability, I mean, a disability. Neurodiversity is challenging, right, Jen? It's challenging. It's different. But I said this on a previous episode, is that it's no different than a woman learning about her monthly cycle, her menstruation, right? Because you're going to have to do things to counter that, right? You're going to have to go get supplies. You're going to maybe have to take some medications. Maybe you're going to have a heating pad or whatever. So you have to make adjustments for something that's naturally part of you, right? But it's not a disability.
The tricky part, though, with the word disability is, if you need workplace accommodations, right? If you need things to be a little bit different for you so that you can maximize your productivity and succeed at your job, the only way to do that is to call it a disability if you want to request formal accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's tricky.
It is tricky. It is. Yeah,
and
very.
You want to disclose your diagnosis because there is going to be stigma associated with that. You may never be perceived the same way again by those who know about it. There's no easy answers.
So we're going to pause on that because I want to keep going with that, but we have two questions. So the first is, what are some good sources to educate myself on neurodiversity, neurodiverse? Okay, so you can actually Google the term, and I would recommend reading things by reputable sources like Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Yale, Drexel University has put out a wonderful article. And then there are also some fantastic information, funny enough, from like Bureau of Labor and Statistics. You could get some very interesting data there, believe it or not. And then there are also some very interesting organizations that are specifically geared towards the different specific types of neurodiversity too. So neurodiversity is very grand. It's very big. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. But I would start with Googling the term neurodiversity and reading the articles that pop up from reputable sources. Again, reputable. Psychology Today has some great stuff, things like that. Don't read Yahoo News and stuff like that. And then we also had a question, what are some of the main symptoms that you can have? Well, that depends on your diagnoses, right? If you are wondering if you might be neurodiverse, here are some interesting things that I've learned about neurodiverse people and how I can usually spot my community is a different way of thinking. Right. So a lot of times there's actually a different brain pattern. You addressed that a little bit, Jen. You can have a person has different mannerisms sometimes than other people's in terms of how they interact with you. For instance, in the autistic community, a lot of times they avoid eye contact. They don't really want to look at you because they're actually focusing. People think that they're not paying attention, but that's actually how they focus a lot of times. Again, that's not representative of the whole community, but it's common. Jen, what are some other things that you can think of that are something that you might notice in a neurodiverse individual?
For me personally, I've already mentioned it, freakish enthusiasm. Like I get excited, right? I have a new idea and I want to express it, and I see a new solution to a problem. People are like, ooh, you're trying too hard. You're a little intense. It's too much for me. Something else that I think is really beautiful about the neurodiverse community is that we're not assholes. We don't suck as humans. Like we have kind hearts. Right?
That's a positive, but that's a positive generalization. I don't know that it's true. I'm pretty certain I've known a couple of jerks in the community, but I get your point.
There's going to be jerks everywhere, but the people who are like really accepting of themselves and comfortable with themselves, like they tend to just be kind people. They're not misleading. Like I have an inability to be anything other than myself.
Yes. Yes.
Which I hated and was making very unpopular as a teenager because
that's actually true.
Absolute weirdo. Right?
The authentic self does tend to be more natural to the neurodiverse community. There have actually been some very interesting studies put out about that. I cannot think off the top of my head this morning where from, and I feel very bad about that. But there have been some very, very interesting articles put out about that and studies put out about that. And also the compassion aspect. That actually is a very real manifestation of an empathetic characteristics as well. And actually, my neurodiversity as it developed helped make me that way. I did not start that way, but just as it evolved, that is something that came into being. So very much to your point. So so I want to kind of dive back into. So you have this, you have this, you know, diagnosis. That's the term I like to use. And again, terminology is tricky. Everybody has their own. For instance, some people say neurodivergent, but then there's a huge part of the population and the neurodiverse community that does not like that term and sees it as almost a slur. So it just, everybody has their own terminology. That's what I say. Everybody has their own. Maybe be careful using it, but maybe ask people what they want you to call them. But I know that could be kind of tricky too. So just work with it. We had, what would you suggest as common workplace accommodations for the neurodiverse? First of all, as somebody who works in HR, let me tell you, you should already be offering these accommodations to everyone, assuming, because almost a third of the population is neurodiverse, that there are going to be some people that want these accommodations. You'll notice I always wear headphones. There is a reason for that. Sensory input, focus, things like that. There are bouncy balls for people with ADHD, the yoga balls to sit on. tends to be very popular. Jen, what are some other accommodations that people might ask for?
Something I dealt with personally was I cannot work in an open workspace, right? Surrounded by people who are interrupting me constantly. I'm a social soul, and if there are there's a lot of chatter around me, I can't focus there. And then, people are popping by and they're interrupting what I'm doing. And I'm so happy to see them and so happy to talk with them. And then I can't get my motivation back to get going again. So like, I need quiet, private space to work, to actually be productive. And so what was happening to me is I would be in the office all day long, and I would be in meetings and I would be having conversations and I would have just distractions everywhere. And I could not actually focus and work until the office emptied out.
Interesting. So the quiet was very important to you.
Yes, I need to work in isolation to be productive. And so, if you have a hybridized work environment where, someone has the opportunity to be productive at home, if there is a reason to have them in the office, then, don't make them come in every day. Right. And
yes. And that's true anyway for your employees, by the way. Have remote options. Come on, people.
Noise can be a problem for a lot of people.
Yes.
Lighting can be a problem for a lot of people.
Lighting is huge. Especially there are, and I want to hit on that because that's huge. So lighting is a big issue. There are some of the neurodiversities is that you can have migraine issues due to lighting. You can have seizure activity, believe it or not, due to certain types of lighting. So companies be very, very aware of lighting when you're choosing it. Don't get those bright, awful, you remember those like 80s, like oppressive, lightings that they had. There were just, yes, you could hear them. Yeah, I don't even know what they were called, but they were awful. Fluorescent. Yeah, the fluorescent tubing. Ugh. So this is all part of inclusion. So, and these are things that should just be generically considered and offered when a third of your population is going to end up needing these. And then you also have all the physical diversities and all of that as well. So having accommodations naturally be part of your world should be a thing. You shouldn't have to ask for that. And now you may have to ask for specifically what you would like, but there should be an open, hey, we accommodate whatever you need. Just tell us what you need. We got you. That should be the attitude.
Yeah. Something I really struggled with was expense reports. Could not do expense reports. And the more receipts I collected, the more difficult it was to begin. And I asked for help one day. I was the person who did the most travel in the company. I had the most expenses, and they were all on my personal credit cards. And I asked for help. And the feedback I got was, you're not senior enough. You don't get any help. You cannot.
Oh my God. What a rude, you just don't matter.
Just do it. Just do it. And just do it works for a neurotypical person. It's hard
to understand. Does it though? I feel like if you're not good at something, you're just not good at it. Like what an odd response.
People with a typical brain, they can just go, oh, I just need to do this and just begin.
That's so funny. But they just told you, Like, you just don't matter, basically.
You're not
Like,
senior, you're not a
you're
vice
not special
president for
enough.
hire,
Oh
and
God.
therefore we're not going to help you. And certain meeting styles I found very difficult. Like you meet and then you're working separately and then you meet. I am more productive at a working meeting, right? Let's make things happen.
Right.
Right. Let's not just talk about it.
And
Let's actually do
that
while
is
we're here
true.
together.
That is true for a lot of the neurodiverse community, especially on the ADHD side. I've worked with quite a few people with ADHD, and they have all told me the same thing, that they like. And I'm not saying that applies to every single person with ADHD, but it's very large percent of that population that they do better with working meetings. So the main discrimination here that we're talking about, folks, is just a passive discrimination. And that's what a lot of people miss. And you hear this discussed with other types of discrimination as well right now, right? It's just that passive, just we're just not going to think about you, and we're just not going to make a big deal about it. And if you're running a company, that's ridiculous. Every person is different. You should be anticipating each person's needs. Parents have different needs from non-parents. People with medical conditions have different needs from people who don't have them. People that are neurodiverse have different needs. People at different ages have different needs. It's assume everybody's going to be a little bit different. Manage equally, but not identical. That's huge. Manage equally, but not identical. And assume that your staff is going to need help. I've had people that I don't even know if it was for a neurodiverse reason that were on my staff that just all needed different things. This one was weak here, this one was strong there. So we'd pair them together. You help with this, you help with this. I had a guy this years ago that I worked with. God love him. He had the I don't know if it was the displeasure or pleasure of sitting next to me for a year when I worked in debt settlement. And there were certain clients I just couldn't deal with. I could not, because they just were whiny and they just didn't want to help themselves. And I could not wrap my little, that was part of my neurodiversity. I trained myself out of that, but I just couldn't do it. He couldn't do his busy work. So we would swap. And he would talk to those difficult people and I would do his busy work, and everybody was happy because I no longer got accused of being mean to people. Which I was not, but I did push them. But that's part of it, right? Learning to work together. That's a thing. You don't, just because somebody has a weakness in their job doesn't mean you should fire them or remove them. Work together, work with them. So let's talk about telling people about your condition, because you touched on that earlier.
Well, it's not something I ever was able to disclose to an employer personally, because I did not ever get the diagnosis while I had an employer. I was self-employed at that point in time.
Well, then I guess you didn't have any problems telling your employer now, did you?
So, and that's a difficult thing to disclose because there could be negative consequences. I think that the discrimination that a person who doesn't disclose experiences, it's just there's a bias because I can feel that you are different and that makes me uncomfortable. And so there's a bias, but like it's fuzzy. So colleagues and leadership, they don't even know exactly why they feel uncomfortable with certain people.
That's true.
And that is problematic, that you're not a culture fit, right? You might not even get hired because you didn't make eye contact, for example.
Right.
Or you were a little too big and energetic during the interview, right?
Yeah.
You're like spazzing out with your excitement, or whatever it is about you that it's just a reflection of a brain that operates a little bit differently. There's very minimal understanding of people who are behaving a little bit differently. And so they get overlooked for opportunity. They get overlooked for advancement. They get, rather than, you swapped tasks with your colleague and made it work. So, but instead of those opportunities, often it's like, well, this is the job and you need to do the job the way the job is meant. And it's set in stone. And if you can't do it exactly this way, then you're not good at this job. So it's challenging. Like there needs to be education, and you shouldn't have to disclose. Like you've already said, these accommodations should be available to anyone.
Should be available. Also, because I will say this.
Diagnosis is a privilege. Not everyone can get the diagnosis or medication if they choose medication. And if you do disclose, I've heard, I'm a part of some communities of people, and I've heard stories of people who, when they disclose, they'll get comments like, "Did you take your meds today?"
Oh yeah. And let me tell you, I've actually, and I want to, so before I go into my opinions, let me say that I have been flat out discriminated against for my diagnosis, to the point one time I was terminated randomly a month after disclosing. Just all of a sudden, somebody who'd had nothing but positive reports had nothing but negative, and all of a sudden I was gone. It was so overt. I mean, it happened right after I told them, and no performance changes. And then another time I was specifically told I would never hire somebody who has bipolar disorder. Yeah. So I've experienced it. I have, and I've worked with plenty of people that could not have freaking cared less. they were just like, meh, okay, that's just you, whatever. You're still just Catherine, no big deal. So I've seen it both ways, and I've heard horror stories, and I've heard wonderful, beautiful stories. We had Mark Travis Rivera on with us before, and he shared a beautiful story about how his boss said, "Okay, great. What can we do for you? What do you need?" Because he was going through his diagnosis and he needed some accommodations. And her response was just beautiful to it and just was very, very supportive. So there is both. I'm asked all the time, do you disclose? Do you not disclose? My honest opinion is, and this is such a cop out, I know, but it's true, is do whatever is going to work for you. So if you just refuse to work with people that maybe need a little education, maybe need a little patience while they start to understand these kinds of things, if that's just not going to work for you, then disclose and see what happens. Just do it. If you're just like, you know what, I need a job for whatever reason, or this is just really not something that bothers me or affects me that much, I don't think they'll ever even notice, then don't. Whatever is going to work for you, but be prepared for that response, because sometimes it's ugly and sometimes it's positive. So, and you just never know what you're going to get. Trust me.
Yeah. Well,
You never know.
DEI being such an important topic in this moment in time, every company is hiring their own internal DEI advocate. And if they are already talking about neurodiversity, if that's something that they are considering a part of their DEI program, then it's probably a safer space to disclose.
If they're talking about it, yes. Most companies still do not seem to know what neurodiversity is.
So if they're not talking about it, but there is someone leading DEI initiatives, there could be an opportunity to say, hey, my little cousin got diagnosed with autism, and I've been learning a lot about it and thinking about it. And shouldn't this be a part of our DEI? Shouldn't we be talking about neurodiversity? Right? And see if you can kind of plant that seed, see how that's received.
That's a good piece of advice. Yeah, just kind of feel it out. Hey, what's your deal?
I disclosed to a client once.
Okay.
I was struggling with my time management and deadlines, and it really sucks to be a business owner and you're not delivering the way you really want to deliver. And, when I first got the diagnosis, I just spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, am I different now? Right? It was kind of like,
and you're not. That's the thing. You've had it the whole time. It's just new information.
But it took me a while to really wrap my head around it and not see myself as someone different beforehand versus where I was in that moment. That it was a temporary kind of processing thing.
And it's common. That's a very common response.
So I was very much thinking about it a lot and recognizing the ways that it was affecting my performance. And I disclosed to one of my clients, and she was just silent. And I was like, oh, was this a bad idea? Was this a bad idea? I don't know. And then
was I just weird?
It never came up again. And then our relationship felt normal from that point forward. So I just didn't give it much thought. But
maybe she just didn't know what to say. Maybe she's like, okay, what do I do with this?
That is probably how most people feel.
I think so. I think
prepared for stunned silence and think about how to deal with that. If you should do anything at all, maybe you just give them the space to think for a moment. People who are ADHD have a tendency to fill gaps in conversation and just like blah, 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 blah. Consciously pause.
Yes. Silence is golden. It's true. And I want to, so talking about this is not just going to happen at work. We've kind of covered the professional aspects, that accommodation should just be part of life. And you should ask for anything that you need. And oh, and by the way, here's a tip on how to ask for things. People always ask me that. How do I ask for things that I need in a, in a non-perfect world? Just make it no big deal. Just say, hey, this is something that helps me work better. Can I have this? You don't need to explain why. You don't need to. Just this is what I need. Voila, here it is. And then get it. Just let them know this is what I need. So, but there's also a personal element. You have to talk, you might need or want to talk to your family or friends about it. You might need or want to talk to somebody at your church about it, whatever your circumstance is, or in a volunteer group that you work with. And that can be just as hard, if not harder, because no matter where you are, people do change how they think about you for a while. So I've learned that when I talk to people about, especially my neurodiversity that causes the seizure activity, if you saw last week's show, you got to see a little bit of that. I was twitching on camera. It takes people a minute to adjust, right? They have to process this. And at first they might be afraid. They might think, oh no, what do I need to do for you? Something's wrong and I need to help. A lot of times when we love somebody, that's our response. My sister went through some things a few years ago, and that was my response: is I got to fix it. Oh no, my baby, there's something wrong. But there wasn't. All she needed was for me to be there and just know, and to let her tell me what she needed when she needed it, and the rest of the time to back off. So, and that's a hard lesson. So to your point, sometimes you need to let people relax and feel it and think about it, and process what's being said to them. If there's that long silence and you need to break it, because sometimes it gets a little weird, maybe say, do you have questions? And be there for them, educate them, teach them, because they just want to know that you're okay in a lot of circumstances. For a while, they may be kind of weird. They may ask you weird questions. like I get all kinds of bizarre questions after people find out about my condition. And people will worry about you at times when they don't need to worry. It goes away. Let me tell you, the more that they see you and the more that they're used to it and they're used to talking about it, it goes away. And one thing I started doing is, instead of calling my seizures, I called them my floppies. Because it makes people laugh. Just like that. It makes them smile. It makes them laugh. And it helps them to realize that I'm not necessarily in pain when this is happening. I am not necessarily in any kind of danger. This is just what my body's doing at this particular moment. As Stacy pointed out in last week's episode, they're my dance moves. That's just what's going on with me. So maybe just, like, to your point, give them space. Let them process it and think about it. It's tough, right? It's weird to talk about some of this stuff. It shouldn't be.
But you don't have to disclose.
No.
That's a choice, even with your friends and family. And you are inevitably, if you do choose to disclose openly, you're going to run into people who are very judgmental and start challenging you on your choices of whether you are or are not taking medication. There is bias against certain medications.
Yes.
Or what's wrong with you? You're not taking medication. Like, whatever choice you're making, somebody is going to judge it, and that's going to suck. If you need to talk to people, if you need support and you are not prepared to disclose to family and friends, there is an abundance of beautiful communities for people like you. They're out there.
That is true. And Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
There are a lot of great Facebook groups. And, join a bunch of them and figure out which ones feel right. And there are people like you that you can share experiences with and be validated. And you might find some communities like I did, where I was like, I definitely don't belong here. I don't want to sit here and complain about the gloom and doom, because the doom and gloom is so much smaller than the good part for me personally. Right. That's not everybody's experience, but like your attitude is going to guide your success in life, the way you perceive
Mhm.
yourself and your opportunities. If you're not capable of seeing yourself as anything other than disabled and marginalized and disadvantaged, then that is what you will be. It is a
Yes, that is
choice
true. That is true.
to be happy and to be successful. You just have to do it within the limitations of what you're working with.
Right. It just work within your little bubble of reality. I do firmly believe in mentality and willpower. There was so many years ago, my mother was diagnosed with a very rare form of leukemia, and it was very late stage because it was masked by her rheumatoid arthritis and treatments. And basically, they told us she was dying. And she goes to the hospital, and one of the things, and they're all running around her doing all these chaotic things. And one of her nurses looks at her and says, "Do I need to have somebody come to help you make final preparations?" And my mother sits up, looks at her and says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I have another daughter to raise. I'm not going anywhere." 2 months later, she came home on my birthday. Mind over matter. My father has for years been my role model for mental health and working through it and mind over matter, and taught me a lot, and took the time to kind of nurture me in that way because it was something that he could relate to. And that man has never missed a day at work. He's never done, and he has been successful. He's a wonderful, wonderful pianist, extremely gifted. He's been successful there. He's been successful as a college teacher. And so it's very much mind over matter. It really is. If you decide that you want to be successful, Mark Travis Rivera, who's been on the show, he started a dance troupe for people with physical disabilities. And that's awesome. That is so cool. He wanted to dance. He said, "I don't care. I have cerebral palsy. I'm going to dance. That's what's going to happen." And so you can, and it may be different. It may be not quite what you pictured, but it can still be wonderful. So I think that's kind of the message here is, and people, when you're meeting someone and you're trying to understand them, listen to what they're telling you and don't project your insecurities onto them. Like I did to my sister. When I went to my sister, I was like, panic, I got to help you. She's like, "No, back off, weirdo. I'm good." You know, don't do that. Don't project your insecurities onto them. I have people, when I talk about the hysterectomy, that go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Really? You're sorry that I'm healthier and I don't hurt all the time? That's weird. You know, I know what they're trying to say, but they make it real awkward. You know, they just make it, or I should say, I know what they're trying to say. Everybody has a different expression, but I know they're trying to help. But it's just awkward and weird. So let somebody else respond naturally. That's it. So kind of concluding. So we talked about working through the, working through the diagnostic process and what that's like, and sitting with it, feeling it, all of that. At work, disclose or don't. Up to you, just depending on what you think is best for you. If you do want to ask for an accommodation, just tell them it's what you need. You don't owe them a why. This is just, this helps me work better. I would like to have it. If you'd like to disclose due, you don't. Ultimately, ADA does say that they have to give you a reasonable accommodation. So if you really want it that bad and it's just something you're willing to do, go ahead and ask for your accommodation and go through the whole process. It's not very complicated. And Jen, I'm going to let you wrap up on talking to friends and family, because I loved what you were saying.
Gosh, what is the right thing to do? Yeah, just choose. It's up to you, right? Do you have people in your life who are empathetic and compassionate and who are going to just support you? Or if you are blessed with that circle of family and friends, then you can tell them. Not everybody has that opportunity. Not everybody is surrounded by love. You can find your community. You can find your people. They exist. You do need to be around people who understand you, whether they are your online friends or your IRL friends. So, you just have to kind of
said IRL. I'm stuck on that now. You just said IRL. Yeah. In real life is what that means for those that do not know.
But it does help to have community. So
it does. Find your tribe.
Yeah. Is it going to be, your colleagues? Is it going to be your friends? Is it going to be your family? Or maybe you only want to discuss it with, the weirdos on the internet. That
like us. We're weirdos on the internet. So thank you for that, Jen, because I think that that's a big part of it. Education, by the way, folks, that's how you debunk myths, and that's how you get past discrimination, is education. Most of the time, discrimination is based on ignorance. It really is. And I don't mean ignorance like the person's dumb. Okay, I want to make that real, or they're unintelligent or anything like that. Ignorance can just mean I just haven't learned about this yet. So teach people, talk about it. We had a question, what is being done to help spread the word on this across big and small companies, since this seems to be new, even though it's not really. Talking.
We're doing it right now.
This is it. Yeah, this is the thing. There are articles being put out. Hewlett Packard actually has done a great job. They issued out information from a whole new program they have about, well, new to them, about neurodiversity, and they have neurodiverse teams specifically, and they cultivate the neurodiversity. They don't just hire, they cultivate it, and they specifically work with it. And those teams are 30% more productive than their counterparts. And it's not just that neurodiverse people are awesome. Here's something for you to know. According to Psychology Today and multiple other sources, when a person is allowed to truly be themselves, they work more effectively. Duh. Because your mind is comfortable. So that's very important, is education and learning, getting out there and reading and educating yourself. So that's another thing I do, by the way, when I talk to people about bipolar 1 or any other neurodiversities. I say, here's some places where you can find education on this. This is where you can learn about this. And most people are like, cool, I'll go learn about this. Some people are weird and they don't, but whatever, what can you do about them? But just education, talking, communicating, sharing. And I love that somebody on here, by the way, they specifically said that they are going to be having a meeting later, and that anybody watching, they are free to ask for an accommodation. Yay! Celebration of that. I love that. That's really beautiful. So yeah, just reach out, ask for whatever you need, communicate what you need, find your tribe, find awesome people like Jen. I found Jen by talking about neurodiversity. My tribe grew because I talked about what's going on in my life. You are not weird. You are not alone. You are not experiencing a deficit. You're just being you. You're just being you. Go out there and find your tribe, because there are plenty of people out there that will celebrate you and help you to find your superpowers, and that will help you to grow and to feel comfortable in your own skin. Reach out on LinkedIn to us. We are both on LinkedIn. Reach out and ask anything that you would like to ask us. We would both love to have those discussions with you, help you find resources, help you communicate to your employer. If you are an employer, help you communicate best with your employees. Please reach out to us. And with that, Jen, please tell us where we can find you.
Mostly I'm talking about email, with just like a little touch of neurodiversity here and there, but I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter at Jen Capstraw, Instagram at Jen Capstraw, and I have a podcast now. So it's called Humans of Email. So you can follow that on Instagram and Twitter as well, at Humans of Email. I think our Twitter handle is humans_of_email, but something that the connection between email and neurodiversity is really fascinating. It's a unique specialty, and I have a suspicion that there's a huge percentage of neurodiverse people in our industry. I've interviewed a number of them. We discovered that our board of directors at Women of Email was 43% neurodiverse. And I don't think that that is coincidental or an accident. So like, I'm a part of an industry that I think is very heavily populated by people like myself. And that's why it's such a great place to be. So that is the connection between email.
I love it. And it's true. There are a lot of like IT, graphic design, there are entrepreneurship. Almost every entrepreneur is neurodiverse. It's crazy. So there are definite fields where it's a lot more prevalent. So reach out, find your community. If you want to follow the show, you can follow us on Instagram at Supermania Show. You can follow us on YouTube. You can subscribe, and you can always connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And with that, everybody, thank you so very much for joining us. Join us again next week. Be great.